We'll start again. Thank you everyone for joining the meeting. We'll issue the initial attendance area review report for the City of London Elementary Panel, and I'll turn that over to you, Associate Director Pratt.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're pleased to present this report this evening, and we have worked diligently over the last several months to come up with a very robust and holistic report and of London, the City of London, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Vogt for introductory comments and to introduce the team. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Good evening, everyone. I'm joined this evening by our Manager of Planning, Ben Puznov, and our consulting partner from Watson & Associates, Jack Amendolia. And I think we'll just jump into the presentation. So next slide there, Ben, and we'll keep her going. So on June 23rd, 2020, trustees passed a motion requesting that administration address the student distribution imbalance across the City of London pending the results of the 2019-2020 round of the Capital Priorities Program. As the board is aware, the overreaching feedback from the ministry was that Thames Valley District School Board should improve facility utilization within the City of London before seeking capital grants for new schools and additions. Subsequent to our discussions with the ministry, administration has been formulating potential boundary changes for the board's consideration in both the elementary and secondary panels. Given the scope and the magnitude of the work, administration thought it was appropriate to review both the elementary and secondary panels independently as two separate reviews. The purpose of the initial attendance area review report before you this evening is to present the potential boundary changes we've assembled for the elementary panel. Administration has examined a host of potential boundary changes involving various school communities across the city. Our approach was thorough, thoughtful, and comprehensive, and the potential boundary changes, new holding zones, and holding zone amendments included in this presentation are for those areas that require immediate attention in order to resolve current or looming accommodation challenges. Up on the agenda are the areas that we will be reviewing this evening. So the attendance area reviews are in Northwest London, West London, and Southwest London with new elementary schools, the Eagle Heights Public School, and accommodations of the Highland and Southdale holding zones, and a final one in the downtown area. We're also proposing holding zone and holding zone amendments with a new East London holding zone at Sir John A. Macdonald, Uplands North holding at Evelyn Harrison Public School, a new Northeast London holding at Bonaventure Meadows Public School, a new Kilbourne holding at Nicholas Wilson Public School and Glencairn Public School, and a Botswick holding at Sir Isaac Brock Public School holding zone amendment. We're going to review some additional overutilized schools to bring them to your attention at this time, and then we will talk about final recommendations that we would like to bring forward on the 23rd. Up on the screen are the utilization maps illustrating the enrollment pressures that we are experiencing across the elementary panel in London. The map on the left shows facility utilization this past school year, while the map on the right shows what is projected to occur by 2025 under a status quo scenario. That is, if no action is taken. As you can see, there is both existing and looming enrollment pressures in the west and north areas of the city being driven predominantly by new development activity. There's also facility underutilization in the east. The purpose of the attendance area review that is before you is to balance enrollment and improve facility utilization where it is practical to do so, to prepare for significant and unprecedented enrollment growth with new holding zones and boundaries for schools that have been approved or proposed, while at the same time considering our remaining underutilized assets and how they could support future enrollment moving forward. Our district is experiencing considerable enrollment growth, and a number of new schools are needed in order to provide student accommodation across London. We have new elementary schools at various stages of the approval and construction process, including a new 556 pupil placed school in Southeast London, scheduled to open in September of 2022. An 802 pupil place elementary school approved in Northwest London, as well as 804 and 507 pupil place schools proposed in Southwest London and Riverbend that are currently under review by the ministry. An attendance area for the new Southeast London Elementary School was previously established by the board and encompasses 3 holding zones as well as a portion of the Westminster Central Public School attendance area. As part of the London Elementary Panel Attendance Area Review, administration is proposing the establishment of 3 new attendance areas in anticipation of the opening of new schools in Northwest London, Riverbend, and Southwest. At this time, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jack Amendolia to begin reviewing the details of the attendance area review. It's all yours, Jack.
Thanks, Jeff. So as Superintendent Vogt just mentioned, some of the board's enrollment pressures are being dealt with by building new schools. These new schools are going to require boundaries, so we're going to spend the next several minutes just going through the 3 new schools that were mentioned and go through what those proposed boundaries are proposed to look like. So we're going to start in the Northwest. This first school, you can see the proposed site is highlighted by that green building that's being highlighted now by the pointer. And that is just south of Sunningdale Road. The proposed boundary here would be land south of Sunningdale and north of Fanshawe Park Road West, between Hyde Park Road and Tokala Trail, as well as the lands south of Fanshawe Park Road West and north of the current Clara Brenton Public School attendance area, between Tribalwood Street on the east and Centennial Central Public School boundary to the west. So this would alleviate pressure both at Sir Arthur Currie, as well as taking in some of the holding zones that are currently attending Ryerson, so it would alleviate future pressures there. Right now, the 2 holding zones are identified by the red crosshatch lines. Number 1, that is the Fox Hollow West holding zone, would be accommodated in the proposed new Northwest London Elementary School boundary. The other holding zone, denoted by number 2, is the Sunningdale North holding zone, and that would attend Sir Arthur Currie once the new school is built. If we move to the next slide, we're going to go in a counterclockwise area, and we're going to go to the new West London Elementary School. So as was mentioned, the Northwest London is approved. This school here is proposed. So the school board submitted a business case to the Ministry of Education in 2021 in May for the construction of a new 507 pupil place school. The school is denoted by the green building, and it would be located within the Warbler Woods development area south of Oxford Street West. And it would provide relief for Byron Northview, as well as most of the existing holding zones in the area that are denoted again by those red hatched lines. So the proposed attendance area for this new school would be land south of the Thames River and north of Oxford Street West, and the lands between Oxford Street West, Gideon Drive, and Woodhull Road. Also includes the lands located south of Oxford Street West, east of Westill Burn, and west of Warbler Woods. And as mentioned, the holding zones would be mostly accommodated at this new school, which would then free up capacity at existing Byron Somerset, which is holding for most of those. Then the creation of space at Byron Somerset would allow us to extend its attendance area north beyond Byron Baseline Road and make a boundary adjustment between that school and Byron Southwood. And then each of those schools would have more natural boundaries. And then we would also allow the holding zone that you see within Byron Southwood to become a permanent part of Byron Southwood's boundary. Again, important to note here that, like we said, the new Northwest London School is approved. This is a proposed school, so these boundaries would be dependent or subject to the approval of this new school. And then continuing in a counterclockwise motion, going to Southwest London. This next school is the new Southwest London Elementary School. Similar to what we just spoke about, it is a proposed school, and a business case was submitted at the same time in May of 2021 for a new school. It's denoted by the green in the top center of this map, and it's located in the Talbot neighborhood, north of Pack Road, west of Bostwick Road. And it would provide immediate relief to Lambeth Public School that you see located just below there, again, as well as many of the holding zones denoted by the red hatch lines. So the proposed boundary for this new school would be land south of Southdale Road, between Colonel Talbot Road and Warncliffe Road South. It includes current holding zones west of Colonel Talbot Road and south of Pack Road, and the land immediately to the south located north of Kilbourne Road and east of Dingman Creek. And as mentioned, it would incorporate most of those holding zones, and you can see they're denoted by various numbers. So I can go through quickly a couple of them. The number 1 is currently holding at White Oaks Public School. Number 2, I believe, is holding at West Sherwood Fox Public School. Number 3 at Rick Hansen, and number 4 at Sir Isaac Brock. All of those areas would be part of the new proposed Southwest London. So we're going to switch gears a little bit on the next slide. So those are the 3 proposed boundaries for 3 new schools. The next couple of slides, we're going to talk about more traditional boundary changes involving existing or changes to existing schools. The first one we want to talk about involves the Eagle Heights School and the Eagle Heights area. And I think it's fair to say this is one of the schools that precipitated or was the impetus behind this larger City of London boundary review. Eagle Heights is one of the larger elementary schools that the board has, about 1,000 students right now, compared to a permanent on-the-ground ministry-rated capacity of 680. So the school requires 18 portables to fully accommodate enrollment. The board has in the past tried to look at other accommodation scenarios here, mainly to look at capital. So the board has submitted a business case to the ministry to build an addition, however, was unsuccessful. And from feedback from the Ministry of Education, it was largely due to surplus spaces around. And this is a pretty common feedback from the ministry is look at equalizing enrollment and using space more efficiently before capital. So that's what the board is doing here. Ultimately, we looked at various options for Eagle Heights to try to equalize enrollment and reduce the reliance on temporary space. The solution that is being presented tonight was deemed the most viable, and what administration is proposing is to convert Eagle Heights to a grade JK to 6 school. So it's currently a JK to 8. And under this proposal, the grade 7 and 8s would be directed south to Victoria Public School that currently has surplus space. So just to go through what the series of steps that would be required. So Victoria Public School does have existing surplus space, but to fully accommodate all the 7 and 8s from Eagle Heights, we would have to create some additional surplus space at Victoria Public School. So the proposal is to adjust Victoria Public School boundary with Wortley Road, small adjustment only involving about 12 students. One of the bigger adjustments would be relocating Victoria Public School holding zone. So it currently has an area that's holding at Victoria Public School. We propose to send that holding zone to both Mountsfield Public School and Cleardale Public School, about just under 100 students. Then we would be able to relocate the full complement of grade 7 and 8 students from Eagle Heights to Victoria. It's about 165 students. And then a very small adjustment, really just reflecting or fixing some of the boundary, again, making it a little bit more natural following the railway line. Small adjustment with 5 students just to fix the boundary between Eagle Heights and University Heights. So that would, so current utilization at Eagle Heights based on the status quo, like we said, about 18 portables, utilization rates between 160, 170%, be reduced to about 130%. Victoria up to just over 100%. If we look at the next slide, we'll get into some detail about the holding zones that would have to move to create that additional space at Victoria. So number 1, that's the area on the top there. That's about 35 students that are currently holding at Victoria Public School that would be permanently accommodated at Mountsfield. The second area, number 2, that larger area in the middle, that's just over 100 students currently holding at Mountsfield Public School. They would just be a permanent part of Mountsfield Public School attendance boundary. And then that final area that we mentioned that's also currently holding at Victoria Public School, about 60 students, would now be a permanent part of Cleardale Public School boundary. So that would be, again, creating both filling up, we'll see on the next slide actually, the impacts of that enrollment, or those changes. So we see that Cleardale status quo around 82, 87%, with that change up to about 100% utilization. Mountsfield around 100 and just over in 2028, about 112, with that change about 108% to 121%. If we look at the changes of the initial boundary change that we proposed with Eagle Heights, we can see that what I was speaking about, Eagle Heights at around 160, 170%, down to just below 130% in the short term, just over 130% in the longer term. And really one of the important numbers I want to highlight there is the portables. 18 portables existing, 21 would be needed in a status quo scenario. That gets reduced from 18 cut in half to 9, and then 10 in the longer term. And then if we again look at Victoria, about 70, 75% utilization status quo, up to just over 100% with the proposed scenario. So all schools now under this scenario would be at or over 100%, and reliance on temporary space would be significantly reduced. If we move to the next slide, we're going to stay in downtown London and move just a little bit to the east. The other school that's experiencing some significant enrollment growth and the area starting to see some particularly significant redevelopment growth in downtown London is St. George. St. George's Public School is estimated to grow to about 450 students by 2025, and that's compared to an on-the-ground utilization of just over 307. So similar to what we were looking at in Eagle Heights, we're getting to utilization rates approaching 150%. So for the recommended solution here, the proposed solution here, we're actually looking at two phases, one for a short-term fix and one for a longer-term fix. So phase one, we want to utilize available space at Aberdeen Public School, which is located just to the south of St. George's attendance boundary. And that would accommodate some enrollment pressures resulting from growth and some existing enrollment in the southern part of St. George's boundary. We'll look at this in a minute, just south of Dufferin Street. However, we'll see in a minute that the growth in St. George's is sustained, and that first phase is not going to be sufficient for the mid to longer term. So in the phase two, what we want to do is utilize space at Ryerson Public School. So if we go back to when I started speaking about the new Northwest London School, and remember that Ryerson is holding enrollment for that new school. So phase two is really based on once that new Northwest London School is built, those holding students are returned back to either Curry or the new school. It's going to open up space at Ryerson for an additional boundary change between St. George and Ryerson. So if we look at the next slide, we'll get a sense of what these phases look like. So this is the phase one, taking that area south of Dufferin Street. It's about 90 students plus some growth. We can improve Aberdeen's utilization to about 80 or 90% in the long run and alleviate some of that at least short-term enrollment growth at St. George. But when we look at the next slide, we'll see that enrollment or that utilization at St. George, while it goes down from 133 to 114% in 2023, by 2028, we're back up to over 140%. That's where that second phase comes in. So again, if we look at that next slide, what we're proposing for the phase two is what I discussed, sending a portion up to Ryerson. And there's another added benefit that comes along here. So I'll just focus quickly on number two first. So that would be the area of the existing St. George boundary that we would send north to attend Ryerson Public School. And that would be about just over 120 students. So providing some significant enrollment pressure relief at St. George. What that also would allow us to do then is that area number one, which is currently part of Eagle Heights boundary, but there's about 30 students that sit on the east side of the river there. We would actually be able to send those to St. George Public School, again, just forming a little bit of a more natural boundary for St. George and providing, at least a classroom, a little bit more than a classroom of additional relief at Eagle Heights, further reducing, probably a portable or two of use there. And if we look at the next slide, it just shows you what those longer term numbers look like. So we can see what I mentioned, a slight reduction at Eagle Heights from 132 to 126. Ryerson, which would drop to below 70% utilization once the holding students are removed, would climb back up to just below 100%, about 96%. And St. George, which we had over 140%, greatly reduced down to just below 120%. So I'm going to now pass things over to Ben, and he's going to walk you through some of the proposed holding zones. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Jack. Good evening, everyone. This slide illustrates how elementary holding zones across London are proposed to be permanently accommodated as part of this current attendance area review process. With the exception of one holding zone, all will be addressed either as part of the Eagle Heights boundary changes, specifically involving permanent accommodation for the areas currently holding at Victoria and Mountsfield, as Jack has just outlined, or the new schools that are currently under construction, have been approved or are proposed. The lone exception, Mr. Chair, is the Kipps Lane holding zone, which constitutes a significant part of the enrollment at the holding school, being Sir John A. Macdonald. The permanent accommodation of those students at another school would result in significant movement in this part of the district, as there is not a proximal school with sufficient consolidated space to accommodate those pupils. More problematically, it would also result in a significant enrollment decline at Sir John A. Macdonald, which is already well under capacity. So as a result, our proposal is thus to continue monitoring enrollment in this particular area, so the Kipps Lane holding zone, and report back to trustees if practical and sustainable accommodation options present themselves in the future. As part of this attendance area review process, we are proposing to establish 4 new holding zones in order to provide interim accommodations for areas anticipated to generate significant enrollment in the years ahead. In addition, a holding zone amendment is also being recommended in Southwest London in order to provide relief to a current holding school that is experiencing considerable enrollment pressure. These new holding zones and the holding zone amendment do not require the formation of attendance area review committees and instead follow a separate procedure for implementation. Mr. Chair, we are proposing that these changes occur as part of the elementary panel review in London because they were derived through a detailed and comprehensive review of enrollment across the city. Should the board approve proceeding with public consultation on November 23rd, we would also solicit feedback regarding the holding zones through a dedicated attendance area review website that will be launched as part of this process and report back to trustees as part of the final attendance area review report that administration will prepare. The first holding zone up on the screen is proposed to be established on the site of the former London Psychiatric Hospital lands. As you can see here, we're estimating approximately 6,700 new residential units in this particular property. And just to orient everybody, this site is located on the east side of Highbury Avenue North and south of Oxford Street. In terms of proximal schools that have space to accommodate students from this proposed holding zone area. As you can see here, the school does lie within the FD Roosevelt Public School attendance area, and that school's capacity is 442 pupil places. 2 other schools nearby, East Carling Public School and Sir John A. Macdonald, were evaluated as part of this process. And from administration's review, we did identify Sir John A. Macdonald as the preferred school, given its current utilization, projected to be approximately 71% in 2023, rising to 75% in 2028. It has the most pupil spaces available in order to accommodate students within that proposed holding zone. I do want to point out that the holding zone is intended to be an interim accommodation measure. We do anticipate that a new school is going to be required on the site of the former London Psychiatric Hospital in order to accommodate students in this area. And we have been in discussions with City of London staff regarding that and are in the process of identifying a school block within this significant redevelopment project. This slide illustrates 2 new holding zones that we're recommending be established in North London. The first one is the Uplands North holding zone, identified as A on the map here. And this particular holding zone is located within the attendance area of Centennial Central Public School. Based on information from the City of London, we do estimate approximately 2,700 units coming online within this particular area. The second holding zone that we're recommending in North London is the Northeast London holding zone. It is located within the attendance area of Cedar Hollow Public School. And as you can see here, there are over 1,000 units that are expected in this particular area. As we can see from the status quo table at the top of the screen, both Centennial Central and Cedar Hollow are projected to have sustained growth and be over capacity into 2023 and into 2028. So we have identified some alternate schools to be able to accommodate holding zone students until permanent accommodations are available. Both Bonaventure Meadows as well as Evelyn Harrison Public School are currently underutilized, projected to have 67% and 73% utilization in 2023, and 57% and 66% utilization in 2028. By directing holding zone students to this area, we do anticipate that Centennial will be just shy of 100% utilization in 2023, rising to approximately 108% by 2028. Correspondingly, Evelyn Harrison will have a utilization of 90% by 2023, and that will rise to 110% by 2028. For Cedar Hollow, we're proposing that Bonaventure Meadows be the holding school. Under this particular scenario, utilization at Cedar Hollow Public School reached just shy of 140% by 2023. And because of the additional growth that's expected in this area, which we'll speak to a little bit later on in the presentation, that will still continue to rise to 186% by 2028. Correspondingly, Bonaventure Meadows, under this scenario, would see utilization of 72% by 2023, rising to 75% by 2028. One of the things to point out, Mr. Chair, is that these particular holding zones, again, are proposed to be interim accommodation solutions. We do anticipate the need for future capital investment in both attendance areas, both Centennial Central and Cedar Hollow, to be able to accommodate those future students. The map on the screen illustrates driving distances from the three holding zones that we just reviewed to the proposed holding schools. So the new Uplands holding at Evelyn Harrison got an approximate drive of a little under 18 minutes. Northeast London holding zone, the drive to Bonaventure Meadows is estimated to be approximately 60 minutes. And the new East London holding zones holding at Sir John A. Macdonald is just shy of 5 minutes. As you can see, driving distances in all three holding zone scenarios are reasonable. In addition to the holding zones in the north, northeast, as well as East London, we are proposing a new holding area within the Lambeth Public School attendance area, which also happens to be the attendance area of the new Southwest London Public School that Jack outlined earlier. So as we heard, the new Southwest London Public School is currently under review with the Ministry of Education. We have proposed a school of 804 pupils. The size of that school, however, will not accommodate all the growth that's expected to come from the approximately 4,000 units that have just been proposed in this particular area. As a result, we are proposing to split this particular property into two following a drain that bisects it and direct students to two holding schools. So the westerly portion, highlighted in red hatching here, will be directed to Nicholas Wilson Public School with a driving distance of approximately 12 minutes. The easterly portion, highlighted in the darker hatching here, would attend Glencairn Public School with a driving distance of approximately 15 minutes. As part of this process, Mr. Chair, we are proposing another school within this particular development, and discussions have just begun with the developer and the City of London in that regard, given the growth that's projected for this area. Shifting slightly to the east of the new Kilbourne holding zone. We have an existing holding zone that's known as the Bostwick holding zone. It's currently holding at Sir Isaac Brock Public School. As you can see from the slide, we're anticipating approximately 1,000 additional units in this particular area. And Sir Isaac Brock is at a point where it's simply oversubscribed, and the new school is recommended in order to take new registrations from new families in this area. Administration has identified Woodland Heights Public School, which is located approximately 5 kilometers and a 12-minute drive to the north, as a school that has available space in order to accommodate students. The expectation is that new families coming out of this particular holding zone would attend Woodland Heights, and siblings of existing students who currently attend Sir Isaac Brock would continue to be eligible to do so. As we can see under a status quo scenario, Sir Isaac Brock does rise from 173% utilization to approximately 194%, and Woodland Heights does experience a bit of a decline from 83% to 77% utilization between 2023 and 2028. As part of this proposed solution, we do anticipate that Sir Isaac Brock does level out, and enrollment at Woodland Heights increases to 87% in 2023, and again to 92% in 2028. As Jack highlighted earlier, the permanent solution for this particular holding zone is the new Southwest London Elementary School, which is currently under review by the Ministry of Education. At this point, Mr. Chair, I'll pass the presentation on to Superintendent Vogt to provide some concluding thoughts on our additional overutilized schools and to review the recommendations.
Thank you, Manager Puznov. The attendance area changes outlined this evening, coupled with the approved proposed schools, provide accommodation solutions for most of the overutilized schools across the city. However, there are certain overutilized schools where no particular boundary changes are available because of persistent overutilization in the surrounding area, or because proximal schools are involved in other potential accommodation solutions. More specifically, Cedar Hollow, Stony Brook, Masonville, and Emily Carr Public Schools pose both medium and long-term challenges. While there is no immediate attendance area review options available to deal with the looming enrollment pressure at these schools, potential solutions include new capital investment in the form of new schools or additions, satellite boundaries or enrollment caps, with students attending underutilized schools in other areas of the city. Administration is actively monitoring the Masonville redevelopment project in order to assess the viability of obtaining a site for a podium school within this project. This podium school could provide future relief to enrollment pressures in both Stony Brook and Masonville attendance areas. The city has indicated that it would add specific policies to the Masonville secondary plan in order to permit such uses in this area. We have also been in discussion with our municipal colleagues in order to request a school block within the planned subdivision in the Cedar Hollow attendance area. An addition may also be considered at the school, as well as Emily Carr Public School. We are here before you this evening in preparation for formal direction to continue with the next phase of this important process. We intend to ask that administration be directed to proceed with the City of London Elementary Panel attendance area review and establish 5 attendance area review committees with the following school community representatives for the purposes of obtaining public feedback regarding the accommodation options included in the initial attendance area review. So we're proposing 5 focus areas with the following school communities in each. So Eagle Heights, which would include Eagle Heights, Victoria, Wortley Road, University Heights, Mountsfield, and Cleardale. Downtown, which would include St. George's, Aberdeen, Ryerson, and Eagle Heights. Northwest London, which would include Sir Arthur Currie and Ryerson. West London, which would include Byron Northview, Byron Southwood, and Byron Somerset. And Southwest London, which would include Lambeth, Sherwood Fox, White Oaks, Rick Hansen, and Sir Isaac Brock. The establishment of the Uplands North, Northeast London, East London, and Kilbourne holding zones and the Bostwick holding zone amendment do not require the formation of an attendance area review committee. Administration would consult with the public on this through the attendance area review website and bring back recommendations for the trustees as part of the final attendance area review report. Administration has set up a website for this attendance area review process, and the details have been shared with those school communities involved in the review. Community members will be encouraged to submit questions and comments, and and to monitor the website in order to stay up to date on the process. Thank you for your attention on this in-depth presentation tonight, and we would be pleased to take questions from the trustees.
Thank you for the presentation, Superintendent Vogt. Trustees, do you have any questions at this time? Trustee Pizzolatto?
Okay, I guess I'll start off. Start off the list of questions. Thank you for the report. It's a big report and a lot of details in there for us to look over. Some of the things I'd like to send this back is to look at the French immersion schools, Jean Sauvé and Louis Arbour, which I haven't seen any details in any thought process in the recommendations, and if have we looked at them, as well as have we looked at the Hamilton, Hamilton Road corridor schools that I know are very underutilized, and I haven't seen that in the this plan. So I'm wondering what your thought process was that those weren't included, or can we include it, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll ask Superintendent Griffith-Jones to respond to the French immersion question. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair. The delivery of the French immersion programming, including a review of the grade entry and extended French immersion programs, was done in our elementary schools with an assessment by the board a couple of years ago. So this was looked at, and the current enrollment pressure is focused in our English schools right now. And our FI elementary schools in London are generally well utilized without significant enrollment pressures at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Griffith-Jones. With respect to your second question regarding the Hamilton Road corridor, I'll look to Manager Puzanoff to answer that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Trustee Pizzolatto. So as part of our review, we did identify Aberdeen Public School as a school that can accommodate some additional enrollment. So that has been included as part of this report. In terms of looking at other schools along the Hamilton Road corridor, specifically Trafalgar, as well as Ealing, there weren't any practical attendance area review solutions to send additional enrollment to those schools, but we did investigate those given the fact that they are currently underutilized. I trust that answers the question. Thank you.
I'll go to the bottom of the list.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Pizzolatto. Trustee Skinner.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Number one, I just want to thank administration for putting it together, this report. I know this may actually be one of the largest accommodation reviews that has happened in Canada. It's definitely the largest here in our area. So I really am appreciative of all the work that you guys have put in. I know that a lot of long hours probably putting this together. But my question, I think, is more about what happens when our proposed schools, the new schools, do not get capital funding. Does the province understand the enrollment situation that we have in London?
Through the chair, thank you for your comments, Trustee Skinner. We're certainly hopeful that we will receive some promising news in the next 4 weeks or so from the ministry in terms of capital submissions. If we are not successful at our submissions, then we would certainly be looking to this board to liaison with ministry officials to advocate for the City of London, as well from an administration perspective, we certainly have very strong relationships with many in the capital branch, and we would be strongly advocating for our case for the City of London, given the extreme enrollment growth over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, you may.
Yes, through you, Chair. As well, I'm wondering if we've reached out to our coterminous board at all, just to see whether or not there was any opportunities there to collaborate on our mutual interests.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll ask Manager Puzanoff if you could please describe relationship and ongoing communications with our coterminous board, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Trustee Skinner. And through the chair, we are in continuing discussions with our coterminous board partners regarding our accommodation needs across London as well as the district at large. Specifically as it relates to the new schools that have been proposed to the 2021 Capital Priorities Program, we did reach out to all three of our coterminous boards to see whether there was any opportunity to partner in order to provide for a stronger business case in order to get projects approved. And at this point in time, the opportunities unfortunately didn't present themselves given where their focus is at this point. Hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Skinner. Trustee Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. First, big thank you to Jeff and your teams for putting together this report, and to Watson and Associates for your work on this as well. It is really thorough, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to review the data that's presented this evening. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to send my questions in advance, so my apologies for that. I will ask my two, and then if I could go to the bottom of the list, please. My first question relates to the Eagle Heights to University Heights boundary adjustment that's being proposed. Right now, it states that there is about 5 students impacted by that change. Just wondering if you could let us know of any development proposed in the area. I understand that 175 Ann Street might be as part of that that shift along that line. So I'm just wondering what's the expected yield from that property, if there's an indication of what that could look like. Thank you.
Thanks. Through the chair, thanks for your question, Trustee Rahman. I will look to Jack Amendola or otherwise Manager Puzanoff to answer that, please.
Yeah, I can take that. Thank you. Yeah, right now we don't have any proposed development in our forecast that we're looking at, or any approved developments, but we can look at that and see if that development would be part of that change and what the yield would be, so we can get back to you on that.
Thank you. My next question it relates to Eagle Heights, and I just want to ensure that I'm understanding what the status, or sorry, what the new proposal as it relates to 2028, forecasting that far out. We're still seeing at Eagle Heights the possibility of 8 portables in 2028. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. Yeah, given the plans that is, and the proximal schools and the geography between some of our proposed solutions, we are still looking at around 8 to 10 portables at Eagle Heights.
May I follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because we heard from the ministry that addressing our empty pupil places was a priority in order to get an addition at Eagle Heights. And I'm just wondering if we're going through the process of this, and we talked about this, that this movement is related to the fact that we had this Eagle Heights submission. We're doing all of these things, yet we still will have significant pressure at Eagle Heights. Yet it doesn't seem that it looks as though we're looking down the road for an addition. Is that not part of the strategy at any point in the next 5 to 10 years? Thanks.
Thanks for the question. In the short to medium term, this relieves significant pressure at Eagle Heights. And in the status quo scenario, you're correct, we will still have reliance on portables at that site. I don't think that will be uncommon, quite frankly, in London for as we go through a growth period. We are going to have significant capital requests as an organization moving forward, not just within the City of London, but in many of our surrounding areas as well. And certainly, we as an organization will have to make some tough decisions around how we prioritize those capital submissions moving forward, including continuing to reevaluate the usage of schools like Eagle Heights.
Thanks, and just to add to that too, I mean, we'll continue to advocate for an addition at Eagle Heights. It was built for another addition, and we would certainly advocate for more classroom addition if enrollment continues to trend upward at that site.
Any further questions from trustees? Oh, Trustee Pizzolato.
I have lots of questions, so just keep putting me on the bottom of the list. But just for clarification for the addition, because Eagle Heights addition was our #1 priority for the last 2 submissions, I believe. So it was submitted as an addition, right? We're just waiting. I'm just clarifying that. We're just waiting to see if the minister will approve our addition. Is that where we're at for that?
Thanks to the chair. That is correct. Trustees in the ranking did put that as a sort of a #1, #2 on our capital priority submission. So if that moves forward, that may change this plan. But based on the original feedback from the ministry, the first time we submitted that business case, they felt the business case was very weak in their perspective, based on proximal empty space, people place elsewhere in the city. So we're not sure that would be the ministry's view of their #1 or #2 in the City of London.
Just to follow up, where would the empty pupil places that the ministry is saying that we need to fill, where are those locations?
Thanks to the chair. I'll look to Manager Puzanov. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Trustee Pizzolato. And through the chair, the bulk of the pupil places that the ministry pointed to in our discussions after the previous round of capital priorities, so the 2019 round, they did point to pupil places in East London as needing to be utilized before they were to fund additional capital. Hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you, and I can go on the bottom of the list.
Any other questions from trustees, or we go to the bottom of the list? Oh, Trustee Rahman.
Thank you, and through you, and you can also put me to the bottom of the list repeatedly. My next question relates to the Kipps Lane holding zone. So I understand that the closest school is full, North Bray, which was the school they were holding for. If the school population is continuing to be accommodated at Sir John A., why not consult the school to see if this is a permanent solution?
Thank you. I'll look to Manager Puzanov, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Trustee Rahman, and through the chair. Part of the concern with accommodating the holding zone at another school, and we did look at this as part of our review, is just the enrollment at Sir John A. Would be significantly reduced if we were to redirect those students elsewhere. A large portion of that school's attendance currently comes from the holding zone, and that school is already underutilized. Hence our rationale for not proposing permanent accommodation for those students at this time. However, we are looking to monitor this area as we kind of move forward. And if the need does arise, if circumstances change, and there's additional development proposed where we can fill Sir John A. Macdonald, practically, we can certainly look at relocating those holding zone students to a more proximal school. Hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up, I'm just wondering, the only numbers I have related to Louise Arbour and the utilization at Louise Arbour are connected to the one accommodation plan. I'm wondering if I can get updated numbers on how many students are currently at Louise Arbour.
Through the chair, absolutely, we'll be able to provide that information.
Thank you. Trustee Hunt.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'd like to pick up on a couple of the other questions. Particularly, I guess I'll start with the Kipps Lane holding zone and the fact that there just doesn't seem to be anything on the horizon to change the circumstances we just described, except that while we did review grade level entry points and whatnot, this situation requires as much flexibility, I think, as possible. And I'm wondering whether we could consider French immersion. For example, relocating French immersion from Louise Arbour to Sir John A. and utilizing that space where the students are. I just think that opening up French immersion into the considerations allows for so many more possibilities. And so I'm asking, I guess, about those two questions that, because I guess through this process, I mean, trustees can certainly recommend or approve solutions. I'm not sure what the question here is, except that why didn't we consider French immersion?
Thank you. Through the chair. Thank you for your question, Trustee Hunt. As Superintendent Griffith-Jones indicated, we intentionally did not include French immersion as those schools are fairly full and there's great utilization at those schools. And given the fact we had already performed a French immersion review a couple of years ago, were a couple indicators not to include it because this review is so complex on its own with so many moving pieces. But absolutely, your recommendation can be considered as an option as we move forward in these attendance area reviews. The thinking of this board is that single track French immersion is the preferred alternative wherever possible, and certainly a dual track can provide quality French immersion as well. So where possible, we wanted to ensure single track if those schools are utilized to an appropriate level, which they are within the City of London. But certainly take your suggestion under advisement, and we could potentially look at that as part of any input or feedback throughout the attendance area review process. Thank you.
Thank you. We're at the bottom of the list.
Thank you. And my question is about French immersion as well. I think you have to look at all the schools in general and include the Jean Sauvé school, which is really close by. And when I think about this, if 96% of the students are bussed in, right, and it's only accommodating maybe 10 students in the area, I don't know, I'm making these things up, but for the numbers, we really need to look at that school and say, do we need it more for our local students? And then can we maybe move the French immersion students elsewhere? That's just a comment. My other question is, it says 5 to 10 year plan, but I don't see a plan in the report. So I'm wondering, you say a 5-year plan. So what are we doing the first year? What are we doing the second year? What are we doing the third year kind of thing? Will that be included kind of?
Through the chair, unless any of my colleagues view differently, I'm not sure exactly what your question is. We have a plan, and with all respect, we have a plan for the City of London to utilize as much space as possible within a 5-year plan. We will, as we do every year, present our annual accommodation plan, which do include 10-year projections out, and that's our more holistic look at the entire Thames Valley. But certainly once you get past the 5-year enrollment projections, they get less and less precise, and this is the best thinking for the next 5 years in the City of London.
Just a follow up to that question.
Yes.
So, so you want to implement all these changes all in that in the next in 2022, all of the changes?
Thank you through the chair. Yes, all implemented by 2023.
Another question?
I can go on the bottom of the list because
Yeah,
I
sorry.
think
Trustee Roman.
Thank you, and through you. I just wanted to ask about the holding zone input. I'm just wondering, what would that input process look like? Would the school community be informed that their school is being considered for a holding zone, and then would the school council have an opportunity to participate in a discussion, or what would that process look like, since it's not similar to the accommodation review process? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Through the chair, I'll ask Manager Puzanoff to answer this, please.
Thank you very much for the question, Trustee Rahman, and through the chair. So the school communities that are proposed to be new designated holding schools have been notified of the work that's underway. So similarly to the 5 focus areas where attendance area reviews are planned, there will be an opportunity to provide feedback as part of this process through the website that we've set up for this review, assuming we get direction on the 23rd on the 23rd to proceed. And we will be incorporating those comments in the final attendance area review report for trustees' consideration, so you can have a complete picture of what's being provided to us by way of feedback across the entire city. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you so much. My next question pertains to something that we've done at Sir Arthur Currie, and I'm just wondering if there's any thought given to if we will do so for the other focus areas regarding surveys of school population to estimate the sibling count to determine if grandparenting is a viable option with respect to these changes. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. We'll have to take that suggestion under advisement. We haven't considered that as part of this option yet. Thank you.
Trustee Hunt.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to piggyback on another question for further clarification. Regarding the holding schools, I assume that they were notified today, and I assume also that we're expected to approve the holding zones at the next meeting. And having, well, as everyone knows, on the planning staff submitted suggestions for changes to the holding zone policy to improve this consultation, how will we consult with those communities between now and the expected decision at the next meeting?
Thank you through the chair. I'll ask Manager Puzanoff to start, and I may provide some final comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Trustee Hunt. And through the chair, our plan is to incorporate holding zone feedback that we obtained through the website that we've got set up as part of the final report that we intend to present to trustees before the end of the school year. So our expectation is not to deliver any sort of final recommendations on the holding zones at the next meeting. We would certainly wait to hear back from the school communities. Hope that answers the question. Thank you.
That does help to clarify a bit, because I expected that we were approving the holding zones because the current policy doesn't involve consultation. So are any of these holding zone areas developments expected to proceed and have students and houses built prior to I guess June would be when we would approve those holding zones.
Through the chair, Manager Buzanoff, are you aware of that, or can you answer that question, or do we need to take that one back?
Yeah, I can certainly answer the question. Thank you, Trustee Hunt, and through the chair. So the Bostwick holding at Sir Isaac Brock, that particular holding zone is under development, so students are coming out of it. In terms of some of the other holding zones that are proposed, those are much longer timelines for those developments to start substantiating students. We have been in discussions with the City of London on all of those holding zones, so that the East London holding zone, the Uplands North holding zone, as well as the Northeast London holding zone and the Kilbourne holding zone, and we have notified them of our need to designate a holding zone in that area. And certainly the process would be that once a formal development application is filed, we would provide formal comments to that regard. And essentially what would happen then is once trustees make a decision, those school community or those residents and developers would be notified. Through the development circulation process, we do flag this for the development community so they can pass that on to their prospective buyers, so the builders in their subdivisions. And what that does is essentially puts the public on notice that it could potentially be a holding school pending trustee deliberations and decisions. So I hope that answers the question.
Chair, may I have one quick follow-up so that it's in context of this discussion, then I'll be happy to move on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what I heard is that some of the proposed holding zones have residents already. To my knowledge, I don't think the board has approved a holding zone where there already are students. And so I'm interested in how under current policy that would work, and whether or not those particular holding zones have those clauses in their purchase agreements already.
Thank you for your question, Trustee Hunt. We certainly appreciate your comments here, and I think administration would probably want to go back and just do a little bit more detailed research into your question, and we'll bring a fulsome response to the next meeting, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're at the bottom of the list. Trustee Pizzolatto.
Thank you. Just a process question, because I'm not sure, so if someone could let me know about this. So we're just going through the Sir Arthur Currie, kind of reducing the numbers at Sir Arthur Currie right now, and we're going through their school council. And we're going to be doing that again for the boundary review, so we can do it. I just feel bad for this poor community that you keep going back to their school council and their parents, and that's Ryerson as well. So we're allowed to do that? Is that what's? Do you know? Yeah.
Thanks for the question, and through the chair, I'll start it, and I'm sure someone else will add a few comments. So the proposal in front of those two school communities is around interim solutions, just to manage the current overutilization at that school. The long-term proposal here is actually establishing the permanent attendance areas for Sir Arthur Currie and the new school that would go in there. It involves Ryerson because there are families that are holding at Ryerson from that neighborhood. So it would involve the families that are holding at that school. So this is to establish the new and permanent boundaries once that new school is open. Hope that answers the question. And Manager Puzanoff, if you have any other details, feel free to add.
Nothing further. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So in, here. So figure 3.10. So it says 2021, 2022, we're at 4,000 extra students in Thames Valley, in London. Is that correct? And is that equivalent to how many schools would we need for 4,000 extra students? 6 in London? What's What's your best guess?
Thank you, through the chair. Perhaps I'll look to Jack Andola to answer that question.
Yeah, so typically we looked at some, it's always difficult with a holding area to know the exact phasing and timing and yield. But what we've done is we've looked at adjacent areas. So some of the new areas right now, the board's getting a yield of about 0.3, 0.32, something like that. So with about 4,000 units, I mean, based on that math, I mean, you would expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200, 1,300 students. Again, very high level math.
So just for clarification, are we looking at figure 310? I thought those numbers were for all elementary students, like all schools in London. We are at 4,000 extra students projected enrollment between 2021 to 2025. That's what I thought that figure meant.
Thanks to the chair. I'm wondering, Ben, is Ben controlling the slides, Jeff? Ben, would you be able to, if you could?
I believe this is from the report, not from the presentation slides, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
And so I think that's where some of the confusion is. So I don't know, Ben, if you have that in front of you and are able to comment, or we can happily take that back.
Sorry, it's on page 3-11.
Jack, are you able to provide comments on that?
I don't have the report in front of me, but I can open it and get back to you guys.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hunt, I see your hand up.
Yeah,
right?
it's still up
running very close to short of time on this agenda item. Do you have one more question? Thank you.
Well, I feel like it's piggyback night, but I was also looking at that number and trying to understand, even if we had 100% utilization across all schools, that seems to represent, and maybe this is a question to bring back as well, but that seems to represent 180 portables required if we had 100% utilization, which we obviously don't. So the bigger question is, with all of these recommendations, what is the net effect on our portable requirements within the planning window of 2025 and 2028? And I guess I understand we won't have that information tonight, but that's information I'd like to have. And to the same effect, we're introducing a lot of changes that require a lot of busing. And we know that at this point, STS, because of market labor conditions and lots of factors, cannot deliver full busing for all of our students if they were all to register today. So how many buses and how many drivers is expected to be impacted if we implement all of these decisions? And I'm perfectly happy with the understanding that that would need to be a takeaway.
Thank you, through the chair. Trustee Hunt, we will need to get back to you on sort of an estimated portable count for this plan. I'm not sure if we can speak to the future supply and demand of STS, but we could certainly ask the question to see if there's any concerns on delivering our students to these new proposed areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Rahman, you have the last question for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you. I have two questions, if that's okay. My first question relates to the overcapacity area that was identified in the report and the schools that were mentioned in the overcapacity portion. Specifically, there was discussion of a podium school, and I'm just wondering, for those listening in at home, if we could define what a podium school is. Thank you.
I'll take that.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, this would be a new concept to Thames Valley, certainly. So this is a school within an apartment building. So that is what is contemplated within the Masonry Mall secondary plan, is some high density housing, and we would be looking at the possibility of locating a school within that high density development.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My final question just relates to process. So this is coming to the board meeting on November 23rd. Will trustees have an opportunity to ask further questions as they arise before making a decision on that evening, I guess, from a process perspective? Just trying to find out what that will look like. Thank you.
Thanks to the chair. Absolutely, we welcome any further questions, and I'm just looking for an efficient way to do that. Would it be through the website that is being established as a central place to record the questions, or is there a preferred way, Superintendent Vogt, you'd like to see these questions come in?
Yeah, I think if questions come to administration, that's great. We will manage those questions back to the trustees, but we would also include that information within the website as well.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to community meetings with facility services, faculty services, pardon me.
Chair, I believe a trustee who hasn't asked a question has their hand up still.
So, I'm sorry, Trustee Ruddock, I didn't see your hand up. My apologies.
Sorry, thank you. That's okay. I've just been following along, listening, and I'm sorry. I realize you're trying to cut questions off. I have a question, if you'll indulge me.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about we have Westminster slated to close at this moment. Is that part of the empty seats that the government is asking us to fill? Or is that not entering the equation at all?
Thank you. Through the chair, given that Westminster is still an active school, it is still part of the overall OTG, or the capacity of Thames Valley. However, they certainly know that school is slated for closure along with Fairmont. So they know that information as they're analyzing our business plans for our new capital priorities.
Follow up, if I may, Chair?
Yes.
Is there a chance then that that school could be used as a holding zone so that it helps with the overcapacity situation of Sir Isaac?
Thank you. Through the chair. We certainly didn't contemplate that option, as it is, because it is slated for closure in the next year. And given the fact we have so much excess space in other East London schools that could also take that additional enrollment from holding zones.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.